Hello there, this is Pierre with Art of Clean. Over the last few months we've had more and more inquiries about tilers that's laid new floor for clients and there is now somewhat of a haze on the surface. And many clients have called us in to try and rectify this because builders or tilers have attempted to remove this and couldn't do this successfully. I've got some samples on the table here to show you the differences so that you understand this better and know what to do, whether you are the tiler or builder that lays the floor, or whether you're the end user and might have done this floor yourself and now don't understand why this haze appears. So let's quickly explore what can cause haze on floors. The first thing is, and I've got an example here of where grout was applied to the tile and not wiped down thoroughly after the grouting, and now that grout can adhere to the tile and might be quite difficult to remove. In this case I've got three examples of floors here. I've got a limestone tile just here. This is limestone and we've got half of it applied with this side has had impregnator applied or a sealer and that side has not, but we've applied the grout over the surface to give you an example later. Then here we have marble. This is a polished marble, and over here we have travertine. Now they are very similar but quite different actually. I'm not going to go into too much detail. We'll make another video another day about that. Understanding the type of grout you apply is quite important. There's two factors in my opinion that's very important when it comes to grouting your floor and choosing your grout. The first is, I would strongly recommend if you use a stone tile that you use a fine grout. Do not use a sandy grout, because the sandy grout in this marble case will cause scratching once you use your grout float to apply the grout to the surface, because that sandy grout goes into the corner as you wipe your float over the surface, and that would cause scratching because of the sandy grout. So I would strongly recommend you use a fine grout. The other thing with grout is that you need to remember the two differences. There is a flexible grout and a non-flexible grout. Flexible grout contains epoxy. It's very similar to this paint tray. When paint is wet, and that I'm talking about water-based paint, when paint is wet, you will be easily able to remove the residues from the paint tray. But once that paint is dried, you will not be able to remove this paint, no matter what you use, whether you use a detergent or whether you use an acid. You can go as far as using a solvent, and that might solve the problem. It's a lot of work, though you can use a solvent to remove this, and the same applies to the tiles. So your grout can contain epoxies. That makes the flexible grout. It's a very good grout, though it can be problematic to remove. And it is difficult to remove because once the grout is set, the epoxy holds that grout down and your cleaners will not be able to remove that successfully. So, advice to you on how to lay the tile, what steps to take to ensure this problem is as little as possible to you, as small as possible to you. The first thing is, whenever you lay a tile, ensure that you seal the tile before it goes on the floor. That is, before it gets glued down onto the floor, the tile has to be sealed. Let's talk quickly about sealers. I've got some examples here. The examples of the sealers I have is what we call impregnators, and we're talking specifically about stone now. I've got two samples here. One is a water-based impregnator, the other one is a solvent-based impregnator. In this case, the solvent-based impregnator will also be a color enhancer, as you can see there, and this will bring the color out in the stone. If you wish your tile to remain the same and do not change in color, or the color enhancement doesn't happen, then I would recommend you use a normal solvent-based impregnator. I will go into more detail about the solvent and why solvent in another video. So the tile gets then sealed thoroughly, though always remember not to leave a residue on the surface. I would strongly recommend, once you apply the sealer, to wipe it dry, and it's also important to seal the sides of the tile, in this case here down the side of the tile, because what can happen is you can have the grout penetrate into the stone itself, and that can cause a form of picture framing around the tile. So make sure you seal the edges of the tile as well as the surface. Then the tile will get laid. Once the tile is laid and there's no grout applied yet, apply another coating of seal over the top. It's quite easy. You can use a flat mop use a thin coating over the surface, and yet again, do not leave a residue on the surface. Once that's done and it's dry, you can then go ahead and apply the grout to the floor. It's very important that you mix your grout in a clean container, and once the grout goes on the floor, do small areas at a time so that you can then ensure you clean that area thoroughly, because any residue that's left, like in this example here, will be really hard to remove. The reason also I would recommend a flexible grout on a floor is there's always movement on the floor, especially when it's got underfloor heating. Then we talk about expansion joints required, and the subfloor has to be prepared, but that's another story for another day, one of another videos I will make for you. So then, once the grout has been applied, you've done small areas at a time, 2 or 3 or maybe 4 of these size tiles, you will then go ahead and move on to the areas next to it and grout the whole floor. Very important, make sure you remove the grout haze thoroughly. Also look out for, once the floor is dry, you will maybe see some of the grout haze being visible. So if you do 2 square meters at a time, clean your next 2 square meters and then look back at the first 2 square meters you've done and ensure that you go back and clean over the surface again. It's very important to use clean tools and change your water on a regular basis. Then once that tile has been grouted and it's clean, I would strongly recommend you walk over the floor once it's all dry, inspect it thoroughly, and then go ahead and remove any further grout that might be visible. If you have cleaned it thoroughly, you will not have a problem at this stage. You can then go ahead, yet again using a flat mop, and apply a coating of the impregnator, like I've shown you earlier, over the surface of the tile, and that will then give you a final coating of finish. If you have followed these steps carefully and removed all the haze, you will then not have a problem with the floor. Though, the reason I make this video is because sometimes problems do occur, people work too fast, they use dirty tools, etc. They do not clean tiles, and that leaves us with a problem like that. And in the next video, I'll show you how to fix this problem. So, this is Pierre with Art of Clean. Please watch the next video on how to fix a problem where you have grout haze on the surface. Thank you so much. See you next time.